Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole lot of information, distill it down, and really focus on what you need to know. Think of it as, well, your fast track to getting properly informed.
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. And today, our deep dive is all about how we learn from expository text, things like scientific explanations. We're leaning heavily on research by Richard E. Mayer here.
And the main goal really is to figure out how to move past just remembering stuff.
Right.
To actually understanding it, being able to use it in different situations.
Oh, absolutely. It's that classic feeling, isn't it? You read something, you nod along thinking, yep, got it. But then later, maybe on a test or just trying to explain it, poof, it's gone. Or you can't quite connect the dots.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. Mayer and Anderson actually had this great anecdote back in '91. A student bombed a test about how bicycle pumps work a transfer test, asking them to apply the knowledge.
And the student said,
"But I read every word."
oof. Yeah, that perfectly sums up the problem we're tackling today, doesn't it? How do we bridge that gap between just, reading the words and genuinely getting it?
Exactly. So today we'll look at why just reading isn't always enough. We'll explore a few different ideas about how learning actually works.
And then dive into the specific, mental steps that lead to that deeper understanding, that aha moment we're all after.
Precisely. The cognitive processes that help you actually use what you learn.
Okay, sounds good. Where do we start?
Let's kick off with a really key distinction: retention versus transfer.
Okay, retention and transfer.
Right. So retention is basically just remembering information. Can you recall the facts, the definitions, maybe the steps in a process?
So for the bicycle pump, retention would be like remembering, okay, step 1,
Right.
pull the handle up. Step 2, piston moves up. Just listing the sequence.
Exactly. You can spit the facts back out. But transfer is different. It's about taking that knowledge and applying it, using it to solve a new problem or understand a different but related situation.
Like figuring out why your pump isn't working, or maybe suggesting how to make it pump air faster.
Perfect examples. And here's the kicker. Mayer's research often finds that inexperienced learners think college students new to a topic they might actually be okay at retention.
They can memorize the facts for the test.
Right, but they really struggle with transfer. They can't apply that knowledge effectively.
So they learn the what, but not really the why or the how it connects to other things. That ability to adapt is missing.
You nailed it. And this brings us to another related idea: rote learning versus meaningful learning. Mayer and Whitrock talked about this back in '96.
Okay, rote versus meaningful.
Rote learning gets you good retention. You can remember the stuff, but poor transfer. You've memorized it, but you haven't really integrated it, made sense of it.
Like memorizing lines from a play without understanding the plot.
Good analogy. Meaningful learning, on the other hand, gives you both good retention and good transfer. You understand it deeply enough to remember it and use it flexibly.
And that's obviously the goal for anyone listening who wants to really learn something, not just cram for an exam.
Absolutely. The point for you is recognizing that just recalling facts isn't the same as truly understanding how to use them. That's the challenge.
It's about building a usable mental model, not just a list of isolated facts.
Precisely. Mayer also talks about this in terms of learning goals. Knowledge acquisition versus knowledge understanding.
Acquisition versus understanding. How do those map onto retention and transfer?
Well, knowledge acquisition is basically learning for retention. You're just gathering the facts, like knowing the handle is pulled up.
Yeah.
Knowledge understanding, though, is learning for transfer, for application. It involves organizing those facts, connecting them, building a coherent mental picture. It's about seeing the cause and effect, the relationships.
So back to the pump. Acquisition is knowing the parts and steps. Understanding is seeing how pulling the handle causes the piston to move, which causes the valve to open. Seeing that whole system work together.
Exactly. It's about building that interconnected structure in your mind, not just having loose bits of information floating around.
Got it. So if meaningful learning and knowledge understanding are the goals, how did our thinking about how people learn get us here? You mentioned different perspectives.
Yeah, the way we've viewed the learner has really shifted, and that shift highlights why active engagement is so critical. Mayer outlines 3 main perspectives.
Let's go. What is the first one?
First up, we have learners as response strengtheners. This was big in the first half of the 20th century. Think Pavlov, Skinner.
Behaviorism. Stimulus response, rewards, punishments.
Exactly. Learning was seen as strengthening or weakening associations. The learner, pretty passive, really, just reacting to the environment or the teacher who delivers the rewards or punishments.
So not much focus on what's going on inside the learner's head or what strategies they might use.
Not really. The action was mostly external. The learner was sort of a black box where these connections just happened.
Okay, that seems pretty limited if we're talking about understanding complex ideas. What came next?
Next, peaking in the 60s and 70s was the view of learners as information processors.
The computer analogy, right? Input, processing, storage, output.
Precisely. Information comes in through the senses, gets processed in short-term memory, and hopefully encoded into long-term memory, like saving a file on a hard drive.
I remember learning about this. Encoding, retrieval.
Right. It was a step forward because it acknowledged internal mental processes, but the learner was still seen as somewhat passive, kind of like a container receiving information.
So the focus was more on how to get information in and stored, maybe using things like rehearsal or mnemonics.
Yeah, basic strategies like repeating things over and over. Still not a huge emphasis on the learner actively building their own understanding from scratch. The knowledge was sort of seen as something out there to be transferred into the learner.
Okay, so response strengthening, then information processing. Where are we now?
The current dominant view is learners as sense makers. This is often called cognitive constructivism.
Constructivism, the idea that we build our own knowledge.
Exactly. This view, really taking hold from the 80s onwards, emphasizes that learning isn't passive absorption, it's an active process. Learners use the incoming information, plus their existing knowledge, plus cognitive processes, to actively construct their own mental representations, their own understanding.
So we're not just recording information, we're interpreting it, connecting it, trying to make it fit with what we already know.
Precisely. We're actively trying to build a coherent mental model that makes sense to us. Thinkers like Bartlett and Piaget had touched on these ideas earlier, but this view really puts the learner in the driver's seat.
That definitely feels closer to that feeling of an aha moment, where you finally figure out how things fit together.
It does. And crucially, this view makes learning strategies super important. If you're actively building understanding, then how you go about selecting information, organizing it, connecting it, those processes become key.
Okay, so this sense-making view sets the stage for understanding how we achieve meaningful learning.
Right, which leads us perfectly into Mayer's SOI model.
SOI, selection, organization, integration. You mentioned this earlier.
Yes. This is Mayer's framework for the core cognitive processes needed for meaningful learning from text, especially explanatory text like in science.
So these are the active things learners need to do mentally.
Exactly. Let's break them down. First is selecting.
Okay, selecting. What does that involve?
It's about paying attention to the relevant information in the text and, just as importantly, filtering out the irrelevant stuff. You're deciding what's important enough to focus on and bring into your working memory for further processing.
Like highlighting the key terms or the main steps in that bicycle pump explanation,
Wow.
picking out the crucial bits.
Precisely. It's selective encoding, as psychologists sometimes call it. You're choosing what information gets past the initial sensory stage. What would you focus on in that text? That's selection.
Got it. So you pick out the important pieces. What's next? Organization.
Yep. Organizing. Once you've selected the key elements, you need to actively build connections between them. Create a coherent structure in your working memory.
So not just a list of facts, but seeing how they relate.
Exactly. For the pump, it's about seeing the cause and effect chain. Handle down causes piston down, which causes inlet valve to close, which causes air to compress. You're building that internal flowchart or mental map.
Making the sequence and the relationships clear in your mind.
Right. You're actively structuring the selected information. How would you draw that out? What connects to what? That's organizing.
Okay, that makes sense. Select the parts, organize the structure. What's the I in SOI?
Integrating. This is the crucial step where you connect that newly organized structure in your working memory with your existing knowledge stored in long-term memory.
Linking the new stuff to what you already know.
Exactly. It's selective comparison. You're asking, how does this relate to things I already understand? With the pump, maybe you connect it to how a syringe works, or your general knowledge of air pressure, or other mechanical systems.
So you're anchoring the new knowledge, making it stick by relating it to your existing mental framework.
Precisely. This often involves elaboration, thinking more deeply about the new ideas and self-explanation. Trying to explain it in your own words is a really powerful integration strategy. What does this remind you of? Making those links is integration.
Select, organize, integrate. SOI. It feels like a much more active process than just reading.
It absolutely is. Meaningful learning requires engaging all three. Just selecting facts isn't enough. Just organizing them without connecting them to prior knowledge isn't enough either. You need all three working together.
Okay, so understanding this SOI model gives us a map for better learning. How does this translate into practical strategies, either for learners or for teaching?
Well, it shifts how we think about teaching learning strategies. Mayer talks about the what, how, where, and when. The what is moving beyond teaching one general study skill to teaching a collection of specific component cognitive skills related to SOI.
So teaching selecting skills, organizing skills, integrating skills, maybe separately or together.
Right. And the how is focusing on the process of using the strategy, not just the outcome. The wheres is teaching these strategies within specific subjects, like science or history, not in a separate generic class.
Makes sense. Context matters. And the when.
This is interesting. The idea is to introduce these strategies early on, even to novices. Don't wait until students are advanced. Give them the tools from the start.
Like teaching a kid how to use a hammer properly before they start building complex things.
Good analogy. And there are programs that have put these ideas into practice effectively, especially for understanding scientific text.
Oh yeah, tell us about those.
One great example is from Cook and Mayer back in '88. They worked with junior college students on note-taking from science texts.
Okay, what do they do?
They taught students to recognize different common structures in scientific writing, like generalization, enumeration, listing things, and sequence, step by step. Then they gave them structured worksheets based on these structures to guide their note-taking.
So if the text described a sequence, the worksheet prompted them to list the steps, helping them organize.
Exactly. It focused heavily on selecting the key info based on the structure and organizing it systematically. And the results were pretty striking.
What happened?
After just about 8 hours of this training focused on chemistry texts, the students got significantly better, not just at reading biology passages, but specifically at answering transfer questions about biology.
Wow. So the skills transferred from chemistry note-taking to understanding and applying biology concepts, even for less experienced students.
Yes. It really highlights how focusing on selection and organization can boost that deeper understanding and application.
That's really powerful. What's another example?
Another effective approach involves using matrix organizers. Researchers like Dubois and Kira have explored this.
Matrix organizers, like
Yeah.
charts or tables.
Yeah. Imagine you're reading about different types of renewable energy. You'd create a matrix, a table with the energy types, solar, wind, hydro as maybe the columns, and key features, cost, efficiency, environmental impact, as the rows.
And then you fill in the cells with the specific information.
Exactly. It forces you to actively select the relevant features and organize the information in a way that makes comparison and contrast really easy.
I can see how that would really clarify the relationships between different concepts. Again, focusing on selecting and organizing.
Right. And Kira really stresses teaching this within the subject matter class, not as a separate skill. Studies show it improves academic performance for college students.
So both structured note-taking and matrix organizers are practical ways to implement the selecting and organizing parts of SOI.
Definitely. They provide concrete scaffolds to help learners engage in those processes. And while a lot of this research focuses on explanatory scientific texts,
Yeah.
Kira suggests these kinds of organizing strategies, like matrices, might well be useful for other kinds of expository texts too, like comparing historical events, classifying types of literature, describing different theories.
So the principles might be broader than just science.
Potentially, yeah. It opens up avenues for you, the listener, to think about how you might apply these ideas to whatever you're trying to learn.
Okay, this has been really insightful. As we wrap up, what's the big picture takeaway for someone listening who wants to learn more effectively from texts?
I think the core message is, don't just be a passive reader. Meaningful learning, the kind that sticks and that you can actually use, requires active mental work. You need to consciously engage in selecting what's important, organizing it into a coherent structure, and integrating it with what you already know. The SOI model gives you a mental checklist for that active process.
Right, reading every word isn't enough. You have to actively process those words using selection, organization, and integration.
Yeah.
By making those processes intentional, you can move from just remembering facts to truly understanding and being able to apply your knowledge.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you to consider. Think about a time you read something, felt you understood it, but then couldn't quite apply it later.
That frustrating feeling.
Now, looking back, how might actively focusing on selecting, organizing, and integrating during that initial learning have changed the outcome? Could consciously using those SOI processes have helped bridge that gap between reading and applying?
That's a great reflective question. Thinking about how we learn, not just what we learn, using frameworks like SOI, it really empowers you to become a more effective learner. It opens a door to exploring all sorts of specific techniques tailored to these processes.
Definitely. It's a starting point for taking more control over your own understanding.
Well, thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into the science of learning from text, and thanks to all of you for joining us.